and welcome to Spotlight. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide, the largest mass killing in Europe since 1945. In mid-July 1995, over 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys were murdered. Last year, the General Assembly designated July 11th as the International Day of Reflection and commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide. But the international recognition appears to be in stark contrast with the denial of the U.S. and other Western allies of Israel's current genocide in Gaza. Western states and their media that denied the Bosnian genocide now deny the Gaza genocide. The indifference to civilian suffering is almost identical. Israel is using the most advanced weaponry supplied by Western capitals to pummel a helpless civilian population. This is while a network of influence entrenched in Western governments and their mainstream media has utilized all of its tools to silence the uproar against these crimes. We'll be discussing those issues and much more on tonight's edition of Spotlight with our guests. Professor of Humanities at York University, Amila Buturovich is with us from Toronto. And we also have journalist, author, and activist Mr. Fra Hughes joining us from Belfast. Well, welcome to the program to both of our guests. Let's start off with Mr. Hughes in Belfast. Mr. Hughes, the Srebrenica genocide has been compared to the current genocide unfolding against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. As we know, Srebrenica was also comprehensively denied at the time. Talk to us about the parallels that you would draw between these two appalling and unforgettable massacres, which many are considering stains on the international community.
Absolutely. Well, I would lay both of these genocidal campaigns at the altar of imperialism. If we look at the fall of the Soviet Union, then we look at the encroachment from the West, from NATO, up to the Russian borders, which includes the present conflict in Ukraine. So the seeds for the massacre of Srebrenica were sowed by the Americans and by the British and by NATO, who wanted to destroy the Socialist Soviet Republic of Yugoslavia, to break it down into its 6 component parts. They armed, financed, and gave political cover to some groups that were involved in this kind of disintegration of Yugoslavia. And then we can witness the 78-day bombing of Serbia in 1999. That didn't have a UN mandate. That was NATO, the US, and America flexing its military muscles and destroying Belgrade and Serbia and financing and arming the Kosovan Liberation Army in its struggle for liberation against Serbia. So it's Western imperialism, it's Western capitalism, it is the Western media, Western politicians who are fully complicit in the genocide that we witnessed in Srebrenica. And we only need to look at Radovan Milosevic. He got a life sentence for his part in the genocidal campaign in Srebrenica in 1995. And there were 161 different people indicted in the war tribunals based on the conflict in Yugoslavia. And yet we have Netanyahu flying over Italy, flying over Greece, flying over France as a wanted war criminal with an ICC warrant in existence for his arrest to go to The Hague for war crimes. So what we're witnessing in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen is a continuation of the Western imperialist desire to steal the resources that belong to separate sovereign nations and independent people such as the Palestinians. And their only issue is that the Palestinians are in the way of their capitalist greed and their designs on Gaza and the West Bank. And we will continue to watch the hypocrisy, the double standards, the double dealing, the lies and the deceit of Western politicians in bed with their military industrial complex, which is there to steal the resources at the minute in Gaza, they're looking at the oil, they're looking at the gas, they're looking at a Ben Gurion canal,
Sure.
they're looking at creating a high-tech hub in Gaza. It's just they want rid of the people so that they can fulfill their imperialist dreams of making money on the deaths and on the hopes and on the dreams and on the bodies of the Palestinian people.
Ms. Biturovic in Toronto, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that if the world had truly learned from Srebrenica, would we not be seeing another Gaza genocide against rather not be seeing another genocide against Muslims in Gaza. That's a sentiment that's been echoed by many observers and analysts, that the Gaza war shows we've not learned lessons from Srebrenica. Walk us through these comments, please.
I certainly agree to a great extent with that comment. I think that we have witnessed in history over many centuries, many different genocides, and we have never learned, really. The phrase never again that we have seen after the Second World War has been trampled over basically in Srebrenica and now again in Gaza. There have been other major massacres around the world in which the governments and the parties responsible for what has happened have not been really brought to justice. Srebrenica is an excellent example because it is one of the an extremely tragic example, clearly, for one very important thing, and that was really the first time that things were televised in real time and we could witness what was going on. And nobody could really say we did not know or we learned only later. It was happening in real time with TV cameras present, with a really big group of journalists dispatched there and understanding what was going on. There had been warnings, again in real time, yet it happened. And it is clear that there are so many different threads that actually fell apart and that disintegrated in a way that was impossible to morally find a compass that would take care of this, that would prevent the genocide. Mind you, Srebrenica has been identified as genocide by the International Criminal Court and the Court of Justice in a way that at some level obscures the fact that all over Bosnia there were massacres, perhaps not to the extent in the same short amount of time, but nevertheless that the whole legal procedure showed that there are complications at that level as well, and that this is something that we need to expect with Gaza, even though it has been identified in Gaza's case as well by the International Court of Justice that this is clear violation of human rights, unlawful occupation, in their case, of course, a kind of possibility and threat and recognition of genocide, yet as if legal theory and legal practice don't have much in common. This is what partly has been the tragedy, yes.
Fra Hughes, where does this leave the credibility of global bodies and institutions like the UN, which has shown that it's basically ineffective and is at the mercy of the veto-wielding supporters of the Israeli regime? How do Srebrenica and Gaza constitute the failures of the UN?
Well, it proves that the UN is a toothless tiger. It proves that it doesn't have the mechanisms that when you have countries that have a veto, when you have a permanent Security Council where each member has a veto, that allows a block on any type of progress. It allows a block on bringing war criminals before The Hague. It allows people who should be in jail to remain at large, to travel at will. And not only that, but to continue the genocide. I mean, there were people convicted of what happened in Srebrenica. And as I said, like Radovan Milatovic got a life sentence. But he was jailed because he's an enemy of Western imperialism. He was jailed because Serbia stood up against NATO and stood up against the Western capitalist cabal. So if you're an enemy of the United States, if you're an enemy of the United Kingdom, if you're an enemy of the European Union, they will use every method and every effort to either assassinate you or to bring you before the court. As some American diplomat or some American politician claimed that the ICC and the ICJ were only there to prosecute, basically, I'm paraphrasing this, black people and people like Putin and people like the Serbian leaders. So the enemies of Western capitalism can be brought before the courts and justly convicted if the evidence is there. But the people who are there in favour of Western imperialist machinations from Africa to South America to West Asia have absolutely no accountability. They are not held accountable for their crimes. Indeed, they continue to finance them, arm them, and give them political cover.
Ms. Baturovic, on the issue of accountability, what steps, in your opinion, can be taken to prosecute Israeli war criminals? How can the issue of accountability begin to take shape? And as with Srebrenica, will it take decades to serve justice?
Yes, if I can just reflect a little bit on what the other guest has just said, Mr. Hughes. Radovan Karadzic is guilty of genocide, and whether he opposes the West or not, I think is secondary to the fact that he has been indicted and he has been given the sentence in full recognition of his accountability. So I think that the ICC does do a good job when it does when it is given a chance to do a good job. Of course, the legal process is enormously long and it has so many components. And in fact, even bringing up the term genocide, of course, has been legally contentious, even though we use it, of course, when it is so obvious, we have no other word but in fact, account for what we see in front of our very own eyes. But legally speaking, and I'm not within the legal profession, but I remember from, and I know from following up what was happening and unfolding with the International Court of Justice in criminal court regarding former Yugoslavia, that every piece of evidence had to be scrutinized from many different angles. And it really became a theater of law. And it took decades, in fact, to put together something that seemed to be so obvious. So, and of course there are ways in which this can be argued back and forth, and it was argued back and forth. And eventually, some justice was served, but it's too little justice, and that's just one component of it. I mean, even if we indict somebody, what does really that mean for the situation on the ground? Does that serve as a lesson? It certainly serves as a lesson, but it doesn't complete the story. I mean, we have 30 years now down the road in Srebrenica, the denial by Serbia of genocide, the denial of those who surround Srebrenica. Srebrenica falls under the jurisdiction of Republika Srpska of Bosnian Serb leadership, who deny genocide and who actually not only deny it, they glorify genocide. And there is the parallel with Gaza. We have Israel that denies the genocide. And so, even if you bring one person to justice and put them in jail, for life, if you have a whole state apparatus and a whole cultural apparatus that works against recognizing that genocide, taking accountability for that genocide, taking responsibility for it, then we are up against a very severe stream of moral simply incompatibility between what happened and what we have to deal with in the case of Srebrenica 30 years later.
Frau Hughes, how would you break down? Frau Hughes, how would you break down the level of complicity of Washington and its European allies in the Gaza genocide, the military and financial support in tandem with the political cover that they've given to the Israelis? A political analyst that we spoke to earlier regarding the issue echoed also what you mentioned earlier, that Western powers, particularly the U.S., have in fact been involved in other acts of genocide over the past decades.
Yes, 100%. I mean, what we're looking at is, I mean, all the F-16s, all the F-35s, the ships that the Israelis have, tank shells, the guns, the bombs, the supposed B-2 bombers that they might be supplying to Israel. This is an American war in West Asia. This is an American war on the people of Gaza. If America and American politicians stop the money, stop the political cover, stop the vetoes in the UN, stop arming Israel, this genocide would be over inside a couple of weeks. It was proven when Israel attacked Iran that they started running out of their anti-missile missiles, that they started depleting their stock of THAAD missiles and the Iron Dome and David Sling. And it proves that Israel cannot exist as a colonial footprint within the Levant and within the Ummah without the direct involvement of the world's superpower, which is North America, along with the EU, along with NATO, along with Britain and Germany supplying arms and supplying tactical overflights and information. Israel is a Western construct. It's Eastern European Jews who are now living in occupied Palestine. Without America, without its support, without its bombs, it could not possibly exist in its present state. It couldn't carry out the genocide in Gaza. It couldn't continue the illegal occupations and illegal settlements in the West Bank. It couldn't bomb Iran. It couldn't invade and occupy parts of Lebanon. It couldn't invade and occupy parts of Syria. It couldn't bomb Yemen. It couldn't really exist as an apartheid state without the backing of the West. And the reason why Israel is there in the beginning is to act as a wedge, to act as a Western footprint in West Asia, to destabilize the whole region with the intention of dividing the Ummah and creating the opportunities for capitalists, imperialists to steal the resources of West Asia from the people that it belongs to.
And the list just goes on and on. Back to Ms. Baturovich in Toronto. The U.S. sanctions, the recent sanctions against the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Palestine, Francesca Albanese, they are being seen as another clear sign of America's complicity in Israel's war crimes. Will such actions just encourage the leaders of the occupying Israeli regime to continue their brutal atrocities? And do you see this as another instance of blatant disregard for international bodies when it comes to dealing with Israeli crimes?
Absolutely. I think that one of the tragedies of International Court of Justice as well as International Criminal Court is they really don't have teeth unless somebody is there to back them up in real life, in real terms, in sort of realpolitik. And we, what Gaza is showing us, and this is what Srebrenica showed, is this mismatch between how the politics work and how the public outcry is built. And in the case of Srebrenica, it was somewhat different. I mean, the situation was much more confined to a very short period of time. Genocide happened literally under the watchful eyes of the Dutch contingent at the time, UN Dutch contingent. And it happened within basically 2-3 days, even though, of course, it had started earlier and it took a while to complete. But over 8,000 people were killed within 48 hours, practically. And in Gaza, it is so. There was this immediacy that then of response that then required everybody to be on the same page, but that didn't happen. In the case of Gaza, we have an evolving situation day in, day out, atrocities being committed, and day in, day out, the larger and broader and larger gap between those who feel that something should be done, and those who just refuse to do anything about it. And in fact, those who make things complicit. And Francesca Albanese is really quite a remarkable figure in that regard, because she stands so firmly on the grounds of law and evokes the law, but it seems to fall on deaf ears, and people feel extremely helpless about that. And I think what is happening with Gaza, more so than it happened with Srebrenica, even though there are these important parallels, is that there is a sort of global outrage at the way in which governments seem to be disconnected from the will of the people, so that millions of people can be out in the street, but they are seen as a problem for opposing the genocide rather than those who actually support the genocide.
Okay, that's all the time we have for tonight's show. Allow me to thank my guests, Ms. Amila Baturovic, Professor of Humanities at York University, joining us from Toronto. Thanks to journalist, author, and activist Fra Hughes, speaking to us from Belfast. And of course, a special thanks to your viewers for staying with us on tonight's edition of Spotlight. It's good night for now, and see you next time.